All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 20 of the podcast. And I'm so excited to be discussing traditional, indie, and self-publishing with a fantastic panel of guests. I love digging into the nitty-gritty of book publishing as it's a topic I've researched a ton about in preparation for the eventual release of my book, whenever that happens. But each of my guests have experience in either traditional, indie, or self-published markets, or some crossover in there as well. So surely they'll offer up some useful advice for all the writers out there. Also, this will be in relation to sci-fi and fantasy publishing. So what we say during this panel might not apply to other genres like romance or mystery or general fiction, for example. First up is Anthony Ryan, New York Times bestselling author of the Raven Shadow Trilogy, the Draconis Memoria Trilogy, and more. And his latest series, The Covenant of Steel, kicked off last year with The Pariah and continues in June with The Martyr. And this is Anthony's second appearance on the show. So welcome back, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Adrian. Happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you back. And also making her second appearance on the show is Krystle Matar, my dear friend. She's the author of Legacy of the Brightwash, her self-published debut, and a semi-finalist in the recently finished SPFBO 7 competition. So welcome back, Krystle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And my next three guests are all making their first appearances on SFF ADDICTS, including Michael R. Fletcher. He's the author of a number of series and standalones, including the Manifest Delusions series, the Obsidian Path series, and Norylska Groans, which is also another semi-finalist for SPFBO 7, which he co-wrote with Clayton W. Snyder.
Did you say semi-finalist?
Wasn't it a semi-finalist?
He's a finalist.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, oh my God. Dude,
no,
you're
Krystle,
fired.
Krystle was a finalist too.
You're gone.
Yeah.
Oh,
we
she
were
came
finalists
second.
Together.
Second out of 300.
I apologize. I totally fucked that up. Sorry.
Man.
Legacy of the Brightwash finalist for SPFBO 7. And Norylska Groans also finalist for SPFBO 7. Thank you for calling me out, Mike. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for standing up to me, dude.
That's my job.
Krystle just bowed down to my power.
I didn't even clock it.
Oh, man. Mike is also co-host of Wizards, Warriors, and Words with Jed Hearn, Dirk Ashton, and Rob J. Hayes. And the last book in the Obsidian Path trilogy is also coming out just before this episode releases on May 15th. So congrats on that, Mike. How's it going?
Yeah, thanks. It is it's good. Yeah.
It's well and good.
That's some Fletcher enthusiasm.
Hell yes. And we also have Jessica Moon with us. She is the co-founder and creative director of Shadowspark Publishing, an indie publishing house founded in 2019. And she also co-wrote the Proliferation trilogy with her Shadowspark co-founder, Mandy Russell, which was just released back in March, if I'm correct. So congrats on that as well. And welcome to the show, Jessica. How are you?
Hi. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And last up, Ben Galley, living in Vancouver, my old stomping ground. He is the author of the Emaneska Series, the Scarlet Start Trilogy, the Chasing Graves Trilogy, and much more. His newest series is the Scalussen Chronicles, which kicked off in 2020 with The Forever King and followed up last year with Heavy Lies the Crown. So glad to have you with us, Ben. How are you?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm doing good. Doing well. Sleepy, but good.
Yeah, man. Thank you for getting up early to join us. I appreciate
it.
Yeah. So this panel is going to be a bit different than what we normally do here on the podcast. Since we're discussing traditional indie and self-publishing, it's going to be a bit more of a compare and contrast type deal. That way listeners can get a more comprehensive view of publishing based on each panelist's subjective experience. And also, if anyone wants to jump in with a comment while someone else is speaking, just raise your hand and I'll get you in there. And also shout out to author Stephen Arian, who originally was supposed to be on the panel, but he unfortunately got sick. So I hope you feel better, buddy. And he made some criticisms of Duncan Swan's comments about traditional publishing in episode 2. It was way back in August when I started this podcast. And that kind of spurred me on to want to do this compare and contrast type deal because he presented some misconceptions that Duncan had brought up. And I thought this would be a really great opportunity for us to clear the air about the different avenues of publishing and what people can expect based on all of your subjective experience. So I'll first toss this to Anthony. If you could share a bit about your publishing journey and then get into what makes traditional publishing a viable path for authors today.
Yeah, well, I was self-published originally. I won't tell the full story because I think people have heard it before, but I self-published my first book, Blood Song, which eventually started taking off on Amazon, mainly on the Kindle store. And that led to an offer from Ace Rock for a 3-book deal, which I took up. This was 2011, 2012 sort of time, where there were various other people who'd been through the same thing, had taken off in self-publishing, and then been approached by the Big Five. I think it was Big Six in those days. Shows you how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And, it was Amanda Hocking, Hugh Howey, a few others, myself, Jeff Wheeler, who's now selling millions, on an Amazon in-house imprint. You have to say the deal in terms of hard cash wasn't anything like what Amanda Hocking got. But it was, it was a decent chunk of money, but it wasn't quit your job money. But it was a 3-book deal, and my reasons for taking it, were varied. Partly, this is something I'd always wanted, something I've been trying for the better part of 20 plus years. And finally I'd got there, and it would have been a very hard decision to turn it down after trying for so long to get a traditional publishing deal. I should explain that Bloodsong had gone through the aging submission thing and sent it to every agent, in the UK that dealt in fantasy, and they'd all sent it back. So self-publishing was, what else was I going to do with it at that stage? And for it to take off and to get this offer was, I'm not saying it was a no-brainer, but I mean, my 2 main reasons were it's something I'd always wanted, and I felt that going with a major publisher was going to put the book in front of more eyes. It was going to get me more circulation. It was going to get me in bookstores, which I'm sure we can discuss about how hard or easy it is these days to get into bookstores if you're a self-publisher. But then it just wasn't happening. If you're self-published, you would not get into a bookstore. And this was my way of doing that, So my main reasons were I always wanted it, and I thought I'd sell more books if I did it. And it's always a what if. If I hadn't done it, would I be where I am today? I don't know. I've since sold 1 million books worldwide in English, so I think it probably paid off. But it is a big what if. Maybe I'd have sold more if I'd stayed self-published. I don't know. But those are my main reasons.
But it is a reflection of the state of publishing more broadly at that point when you were getting into it. Self-publishing is very different today. We have Jessica and Shadowspark and other indie publishers who are entering the space as well. So I think now there's a lot more, depending on the desires of the individual author, what they want to do, and the amount of work that they're putting in certain areas. And this is something that we'll definitely get into. There is just much more opportunity for people out there. And Anthony, you brought up a couple of things that I wanted to dig in a little bit more. Stephen sent me some notes, which I really appreciate. Some things that he had in commentary to what Duncan was mentioning back in the self-publishing episode, that you might sit in a slush pile for 3 years unless you know the editor, that kind of stuff. When your book does go to an editor via your agent, it would not sit there for a year, never mind 3 years. I think agents, this is something that you can speak to, Anthony, agents are making commission based on how much work they're putting in. So I think they have a lot of incentive to actually put the effort and push your book in as powerful as a way as they can to editors and publishers and that kind of thing. As well, he mentioned that, in regards to how long it takes to find an agent, you mentioned your story, and we'll get into it a little bit more. But it also depends on the book, the agent, the marketing, or the market, timing, luck. Some people could find an agent in 6 months or a year. Other people, it could be longer. So I think it's a bit of a misconception to put any definitive time frame on finding an agent. So for you, Anthony, do you want to get a little bit more into that process of finding an agent, and then what it's like to work with an agent to get your book pushed to publishers or editors?
the risk of everyone hating me, I didn't actually find an agent. My agent found me. So, I was approached by an agent as opposed to vice versa after years of trying to get one prior to this.
Yeah, but that kind of comes into the luck thing too. So
yeah. I gave up looking for an agent when I'd self-published, and when Blood Song took off and I got this deal, suddenly they were coming to me rather than vice versa. My agent's in New York. All the agents I'd tried to approach before are in the UK. And to be honest, it's definitely something I don't regret, getting an agent. Just the fact they have their own legal team. My agent's part of a fairly large agency, and they have a whole legal division which does contracts and all that stuff. And it certainly makes life easier with foreign rights deals and movie deals and all of this sort of thing, which as an individual who's not a lawyer, certainly not a rights lawyer, it's navigating all of that is next to impossible if you don't know what you're doing. And also, if you've got a new project,
go ahead.
If you've got a new project, if you've got a new series, pitching it and approaching publishers and editors, doing that via an agent who they'll actually answer the phone to, is definitely an advantage.
Yeah, because you can have sort of a second set of eyes who are looking over everything, maybe give you some feedback about how you could maybe better pitch your book or that kind of thing. I guess it depends, because there's some agents who do editing and reading and stuff like that, and others who are a little bit less involved in that process, right?
Yeah, my agent doesn't give me an editing pass. That's it's not his job. I don't think.
Right.
But I might be. I know other agents have a lot more of a back and forth with writers than mine does in terms of the actual content of the books. I write them and he sells them is basically how it works now.
And so once you get your agent sells a book, once you get signed to a publisher, what is it like during, say, the editing process, the design process, and then with things like, advances, royalties, and rights and that kind of stuff?
Yes, I think there's a big misconception amongst people who've never had a publishing contract that it's a lot like a lottery win. It's not like a lottery win. You will get some money, but you don't get all the money straight away. You get paid in stages when different editions of the book comes out. You get paid with first publication in ebook, hardcover, and audio. You get paid again when it comes out in paperback 6 months later. You also get a signing fee when you first sign the thing, so it's not like you suddenly get a big wodge of money. And also the advances that, especially as a newcomer to the publishing space, these days you will not get the sort of mythical $1 million advance or anything. It's very, very rare. I mean, we only know about those stories because they're rare and they get told again. Right. The standard advance these days is not in that sort of scale. What I tend to tell people about publishing contracts is write down a list of all your problems before you sign a publishing contract, because I guarantee most of those problems are going to be there after you've signed a publishing contract. It's not the answer to all your problems. You still have a life to live, bills to pay, and all the rest of it. By that token, as I say, it did work out very well for me. Approach it as a business decision, because that's what it is. A publishing contract is not a lottery win. It's a business decision.
Yep. Yeah, it's a legal document that you're entering into, binding with the publisher themselves, and for you, after being confident enough to sign those contracts, and then you enter into the editing process with an editor at a publishing house, but also a designer, someone who's working with the covers and the internal design, the typography, and that kind of stuff. What's your sort of involvement on both of those fronts? I know editing is obviously more because it's the actual words that you've written, but then in terms of design, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about, this is something that Stephen wrote to me, is that depending on the publisher, there are some publishing houses that are more involving when it comes to bringing their authors in for at least second opinions on sort of the artistic direction of the books and that kind of thing. So what has your experience been like?
Well, I've not got experience of two different publishers, Ace and Orbit. Well, three actually with Subterranean Press, because they published the Seven Swords novella series that I did. There's basically a three-stage process with editing. You get the editing letter, which is when your actual editor reads the book, and you get the famous compliment sandwich, where they start off telling you how great it is, then they go on for several pages telling you everything is wrong with it, then they end by once again telling you how great it was. The compliment sandwich.
Just a bunch of backhanded comments.
Yeah.
Compliments. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and it varies from book to book how extensive it's going to be, how much work they think you need to do on it. I've done extensive work on some books and relatively little on others. I've given up trying to predict which is which. But contract-wise, you are legally required to take account of what they say, and you can have a back and forth. As yet, I've never felt anything I've been told by an editor is something that I'll die in a ditch over, and if you don't like it, I'll give you the advance back. Walk away in a huff, because I think most of the time, what my editors say, and they do this for a living. My two principal editors, this has been their entire adult working life, is making books ready for publication. So I think it'd be foolish not to listen to them. Once you get through that stage, there's another two stages where the copy edit, where a different editor, a copy editor, goes through it line by line. I guess all of you pay for this to be done. One of the advantages of being traditionally published, I don't have to pay someone to do this. If I was self-published, I definitely would be paying someone to do, at the very least, a copy edit. And they go through it line by line. They look at the word choice, they look at whether commas are in the right place and all that stuff. That can be, you do have to, they send it back to you and you do have to go through it all. It's not a good idea in my experience to just, tick all the track changes, accept and send it back, because there will be things in there that you don't agree with. And there will be errors in there that, you've missed and the copy editor's missed. So yeah, always go through your copy edits with a fairly fine-tooth comb is my advice. And once that's done, it goes off and gets proofread. And it's always amazing to me the number of things that get missed in proofreading, the number of typos, and some of them fairly embarrassing. But yeah, there's always stuff that comes up in the proofread read. I'm so glad that it didn't go out with that in it. Once that's done, it's pretty much ready to go. But I will always notice things, because I usually listen to the audiobook, 6 months after everything's come out. And there will always be things I notice when I listen to the audiobook that, oh God, I missed that. Sometimes you get a second bite of the cherry because the paperback version comes out later. And you get to correct anything. They send you the proofs for the paperback. Yeah. You get to correct that. When it comes to covers, I get to consult on all the covers. I don't have a final say on it. As yet, I haven't had a cover that I thought was terrible. With the benefit of hindsight, there was some I think that I would have asked to be different. But I don't think I've had a bad cover today. And there's a back and forth on it. There's, I do get asked before they produce the cover for any ideas. What do you think should be on it? Or, this usually boils down to as the editor says, this is what we're thinking. What are you thinking? So yeah, and it's actually one of the easier parts of it for me, the whole cover thing. I don't get I don't lose sleep over it really. And once again, it's not my area of expertise. It's I'm not a designer. It's someone else's job really. If it works, if I look at it and I think, I'd pick that up on a bookshelf in the bookshelf. Yeah, fine. Let's go for it. So yeah, and it doesn't, in terms of the process, it doesn't vary that much between publishers in my experience. In terms of the amount of say you have and the amount of consultation, pretty much the same for me.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have a different experience.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, because there are people I know. I spoke to Krystle Matar, who published The Phlebotomist and Stringers with Angry Robot, and he does have an artistic background, and he was able to sort of deepen the consultation process to the point where he they had come up with an idea, and he said, "Oh, I can draw that." And then they said, "Okay." And then he drew that, and then that ended up being the final cover for The Phlebotomist, which is this really cool.
That cover's gorgeous.
It's this sort of like ink and line shading heart with flowers growing out of it. It's really cool, very bold. But some publishers, I think, Anthony, you mentioned it depends on your expertise or your background. For someone who is a little bit more on the artistic side, and you're getting published, try just like once you're going through that consultation process with the design team, with the cover artist, whatever, just try and get your opinion in there, because it's not necessarily like you're voiceless in these situations. There is opportunity for you to at least recommend something, or say, I have, for me, it's like, I know like these are all my illustrations back here. It's like, the eventual point where I get published, I'm going to be like, yeah, I want to like be involved in this to some degree. So, take it or leave it. And Mike, I'll toss this to you. We've heard Anthony's take on traditional publishing. We'll dig a little bit into a few things afterwards, but first, if you could share your journey with us, because I know you self-published Ghosts of Tomorrow first, and then you got Beyond Redemption traditionally published through Harper Voyager, and then you since went back to self-publishing. So do you want to share a bit about your experience, and then build on what Anthony said, and describe a little bit about the transition back and forth between self-publishing, traditional self-pub?
Okay. So actually, I technically have done indie, traditional, and self-pub in that
nice.
order.
Yeah.
Ghosts of Tomorrow was originally titled 88, was published by a small Canadian press that later ceased to exist. I got the rights back. I self-published 88 as Ghosts of Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But I did that after Beyond Redemption came out, which was published through Harper Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like my experiences, they almost exactly on the trad side mirror what Anthony said. Like right down to in terms of I got a say in cover art, or at least they asked my opinion. The one I liked ended up on the book. Whether that was sort of chance, I have no idea.
And that's the one right behind you in that poster.
That's the one behind me there. Yeah. Richard Anderson cover,
mm-hmm.
which is, you can't see the whole thing, but it's nice.
Great cover.
Yeah. And I totally distracted myself. What the hell are we talking about?
Tell me about your journey, Mike.
Yeah. So, after Beyond Redemption, which was, like critically received well, great reviews, but less than stellar sales. Harper Voyager passed on the sequel. Beyond Redemption was only sold as as one book. It wasn't when I sold it part of a trilogy. But obviously there was more I wanted to tell. I'd already written The Mirror's Truth, the sequel to Beyond Redemption. Harper Voyager looked at the sales, made a business decision, and passed on it. So there I was with this finished novel, and nobody, other publishers all passed on it. No one wants to publish the sequel to something held by another publisher. So at that point, I figured I might as well self-publish. And that The Mirror's Truth was my first self-published novel. And it kind of showed me how doable that whole thing was, the self-publishing side. And after that, I really kind of threw myself into it. Re-released Ghosts of Tomorrow, self-published. So, I mean, like Anthony, trad publishing has always been my original dream. So every book, at least the first book of every series I've written, has been submitted to publishers. First, I was represented by Cameron McClure at Donald Mass Agency. We parted ways because she didn't like the stuff that I was writing was kind of too dark for what she wanted to do. I later was repped by gapping out Ian Drury in the UK, Mark Lawrence's agent. He shopped Blackstone Heart. He shopped City of Sacrifice books. Couldn't sell either of those. And so once again, there I was with finished novels. And there's, I'm not going to just sort of like do nothing with them.
Yeah.
So I self-published those. Blackstone Heart went on to come second in last year's SPFBO. The City of Sacrifice novels are selling well. So it kind of, at each point, the failure has sort of worked really well for me.
You've managed to do something which is difficult for a lot of people, which is successfully pivot. It's like, well, this isn't necessarily working out for me, so I'm going to pivot in this direction. And in your case, it's like self-publishing has worked out for your benefit in a lot of cases where traditional publishers have just not accepted the manuscripts or what have you.
Yep. Who knows as to why, are the books not good enough? Maybe. Are they too dark and cynical? Maybe. Probably.
Norylska Groans, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that one's pretty dark.
Yeah. But, it's like when you're self-publishing, like if you find that tiny little fraction of a percentage niche market, and if they adopt you, and apparently that crazy little niche market has adopted me, you've got a career. Yeah.
And it's like you've carved your path sort of in like the grimdark avenue, which was also blowing up in traditional around the same time. So it's kind of like self-pub and trad. Yeah. And we're riding a similar
entirely
wave.
Accidental.
Yeah, completely.
Like not at all on purpose. I don't think about genre. I don't care. I've never tried to write a grimdark novel. Like it's not interesting to me.
Yeah.
But I write novels and people are like, that's grimdark. I'm like, fine.
But honestly, it's like something I've learned over the course of doing this podcast is just fuck genres, because they are just,
it's just marketing.
It's just marketing. And a lot of the times it's like, I did a space opera panel back in January, and it's just like, this is just incomprehensible how you can clump all these books together, which are so different, and then just slap the name space opera on it. And the same thing happens with fantasy and all the various subgenres and all this crap. So yeah. But Mike, something that you brought up is how you had sold Beyond Redemption to Harper Voyager, but it didn't meet their sales expectations. And this is something that Stephen gave me in his notes that I thought was a really interesting point, which is the notion of advances and things like that. So you would have been paid in advance for Beyond Redemption, but the book didn't necessarily meet their sales expectations. And sometimes authors spend a lot of time in their traditional market, whether it's the first year, whether it's the first 2 years or what have you, it fluctuates so much that you can't really define it, but they spend a lot of the time paying off their advance. And sometimes authors don't pay off their advance.
Beyond Redemption hasn't earned out its advance.
Yeah.
Which is, probably why that was 7 years ago now. And I've never seen a royalty check, or actually I haven't seen a royalty statement in forever. Yeah. Anyway, so, I totally get them passing on the sequel, as a business choice. It's like, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But it's like, regardless of whatever they give you for the advance, if you can clarify this, but I'm pretty sure this is how it works. The advance is given to you, and that's it. That's sort of like their bet on you as an author in the book. So you receive that advance, and if you don't pay it out, you keep that money, but they don't recoup any of their investment.
Exactly. I drank that money long ago.
You probably bought a couple guitars, what have you? Yeah, man.
Oh, I did. There's a couple of expensive guitars back there that the advance definitely purchased.
Cool. So, we've touched on a few things that I think are really important in terms of editing and the design process and that kind of stuff. Royalties and rights, which is something that you deal with more in traditional publishing. Jess, we can get into it later with Shadowspark and how it works on the indie front in terms of that stuff. But Krystle, Jess, Ben, do any of you have any questions or comments or things that you want to get in here about traditional publishing, or if you have any experiences dabbling in it?
I suppose my only
Not really.
kind of experience has been I do have an agent, so I have shopped things out, and it is a longer process than you think it is, even if you've got high hopes, which I normally do. So yeah, that's kind of been my only foray into it.
And with in your case, Ben, do you still have an agent, or how does it work in the self-publishing space? I'll toss this to you and Krystle, and we can sort of transition into self-publishing a little bit more. What was your journey like? Why did you decide to go into self-publishing, and how is that decision born for you personally? And then Ben, if you want to sort of elaborate on your process of finding an agent, and then how that sort of functions in the self-pub space, because I know a lot of self-pub authors don't actually have agents because they're their own marketing team, their own first pass, and a lot of things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. So you just I'm going for the whole self-publishing journey, right? Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, for me it was a dream. Long story short, as a childhood dream. So I always wanted to be an author. My first original dream was to be like the youngest published author I could possibly be. And that literally just kind of like kept
Christopher
away.
Paolini just fucked everyone over.
I was writing before him. I was writing not before him, but I would have been published younger than him.
I'm looking at you, Paolini. I'm coming for you, man.
Yeah, no, he got me. He was kind of big in when I was getting there, and I was like 11 when I wrote my first book, and then life got in the way, and I was just went from different things. I was going to be a pilot, going to be a meteorologist, going to be what's the other things, musician as well. Spent a long time in that. And then dead end jobs just kind of reignited this fire within me about writing. And so I just decided to start basically writing my first book, which was The Written, first the Emaneska series. And I was working probably one of the most dead end jobs that I ever have, which is absolutely awful. And I was just scribbling all day on pieces of paper. What
was the job, just out of curiosity, Ben?
It was serving pasties from a kiosk in a very busy train station in Guildford, UK.
Wow.
And I used to get up at like 4:30, go and put the pasties in by about 5:30 a.m. in the pitch black. So I worked all the way through winter, which was fantastic. And so it was a horrible job. Hated every minute of it. But it was that spurring kind of element I needed to get into or to where I am now. And so I had a book. I spent a couple of weeks maybe researching the trad process and seeing how that worked. And weirdly enough, I saw an advert for self-publish your own book, which was from one of those terrible companies owned by Manifest Delusions. It was Author House UK, of which there are many, and I'm actively against them wherever I see them. All that Author House ex Libris Universe bullshit. And so basically I almost got taken in by them, put into their conveyor belt and charged 10 grand to publish a book, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then I suddenly thought, well, fuck it, I could just do this myself. I spent the last couple of years, learning to be an independent artist in the music world. And so there are a lot of parallels, creating your own album art, getting things, hiring producers and studio time and a lot of different parallels in just producing a professional product. Right. And so I saw that you could basically become, a project manager. You take on a lot of work, and that is one of the downsides of self-publishing in general. You have to take on a lot of roles other than just being an author. But I could see myself as a project manager and just, finding all these freelancers and professionals that I could work with to act like a publishing house and hopefully produce something that's on par with a publishing house. And then the next problem is, distribution and marketing. So, I made a lot of mistakes over about, I would say, a year. I couldn't afford a professional editor, so I did a lot of self-editing. Oops.
Just fingers crossed, better hope it fucking works kind of situation.
That's fine. And I had no, I've never had any professional qualifications in the English language either, aside from, basic high school. So I was like, this will do. And it did well. I mean, it was a time when you could maybe get away with it slightly more back in 2010. But still, I then corrected that and then just kept going, just kept launching the books of the Emaneska series and haven't looked back since, and streamlined a lot, learned a lot from my my mistakes. Professionalism has always been a big key for me since then. So yeah, I'm always working with as many professionals as I can, aiming for as higher, quality inside the book, from the words to the design to the outside design and the cover, to how I kind of handle myself online and with readers and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it is a lot of work. Like I said, you've got it's all on you. There's a bit of extra expenditure. No one's giving you an advance. There are, of course, lots of different ways that you could raise money through grants, Kickstarter, Patreon, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, normally for a first-time author who hasn't got that ability, it's about just shelling out that money yourself and getting that product out and pushing it and rinsing and repeating, which is something I really enjoy. It's all down to me. It's all down to my schedules, my neuroses, my my daily sort of activity. It's all down to me, which suits me as an independent person. I like being an entrepreneur. Always been an entrepreneur. Always messing around with businesses here and there. So yeah, it's just fit in, perfectly to who I am. And every day is the best day, but it's also sometimes the worst day. Being an independent creative. But yeah, that's pretty much my journey. And here I am, 16 books later, 12 years later.
Fantastic.
Still yapping on about fantasy and dark shit.
Dude, we're happy to hear you yap. It's all good. And Ben, you brought up a bunch of points that I'm going to be touching on, but first we'll jump over to Krystle and get your sort of self-publishing journey, why you decided to get into it. We spoke a little bit about this during our one-on-one interview back in February, but if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, the same as everyone else, where it just writing was kind of part of who I am as far as I can remember. I used to go to bookstores and imagine where my name would be on the shelf, and that would be how I got through some pretty hard portions of my life. So it was always a dream that I was hanging on to for a really long time. And then I came back into fantasy after reading Anthony Ryan's Bloodsong, and I wanted to, double down and make it happen. And so I started writing, and I read somewhere that agents like people to have a social media platform, so Twitter or something. So I jumped onto Twitter while I was writing. And the intention then was to be picked up by an agent and a trad house. But I just so happened to make friends in the indie publishing sphere. I met Clayton first, Clayton Snyder, and he kind of, watching him make this happen made it feel like, oh, okay, well, I didn't know that it was an option. I wasn't online very much before, so I had no clue that indie publishing and self-publishing was such a rising force. So I was writing Brightwash, and I was trying to figure out how to make it as appealing to an agent as possible. And I started hiring sensitivity readers to make sure that certain aspects were as good as I could get them. And I started thinking about, okay, well, maybe I'll pay for one round of edits. And then at some point, I just kind of realized, hey, wait a second. If I'm doing all this work myself, maybe I should just continue doing all this work myself. And, I met Fletcher and I met Angela Board, and kind of watching them hustle and grind, it was like, yeah, I can do this. And I saw another panel about trad versus indie, and it was Dirk Ashton who said they're both hard and they're both a lot of work, but one is kind of like being an employee, and one, like Ben said, is like being an entrepreneur, and it's about which one suits your personality. And I was thinking about what I want my cover to look like and what kind of editing services I needed. And I was like, I guess maybe I am an entrepreneur after all. So I didn't query Brightwash at all when it was ready. I just hired a couple more editors and launched it in 2021. Is that right? Yeah, a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah,
come on, Krystle.
Well, listen, the year passes really fast, but also like really slowly. So like I don't know. So something I saw early in the journey while I was making the decision was that you have to manage your expectations as you launch into indie. You have to know, like, why are you here? Why are you writing? What is the goal? And for me, it was like, if, 10 people read it and are affected by it, then good enough. Good enough for me. And I saw a stat somewhere that said the average indie novel sells 100 copies in the first year and 500 copies over the course of its life. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll just I'll make it happen. I've sold ever so slightly more than that now. Brightwash is on track to break even after $4,000 worth of editing and art, and a little bit of a couple programs so I could make my own marketing. But it's a hustle, and it's both exhausting but also energizing. And so you really do have to weigh, what are you in it for? Do you just want to, what's the goal and what's the best path to get to that goal? And for me, I wasn't expecting to be popular, and I was okay with that. And so, I was ready to make my little couple of sales, and everything beyond that has been amazing. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Yeah, but I mean, you touched on some things that Ben was bringing up, and for me, it's like a lot of the time, the hustle aspect of it, of self-publishing, and this is really interesting. I'm gonna give it to Jessica right after to kind of describe your little foray into self-publishing, and then Mike and Anthony as well. And then we'll dig deeper into some of the aspects of self-publishing. But I think a lot of the time it comes down to your personality type. If you're the kind of person who has the personality where, I'm really curious about both Anthony specifically, because he does trad publishing, but also self-publishing. So it's kind of like this dual personality type situation, perhaps. But there has to be a desire to hustle and a thick skin that you have to develop in order to surpass a lot of the hurdles that are presented to you, which would normally be hurdles that a publisher deals with, and you are perhaps not blissfully unaware of, but at the same time, you're not confronted with so directly as you would be with self-publishing. So Jess, I'll give this to you if you want to describe a little bit about that foray into self-publishing that you mentioned.
Oh yeah, it wasn't extensive, really. It was kind of in between. Oh, it's a long story. Really, the only self-publishing we did is little stories. We were part of an anthology series of just various authors that were putting it together. Little story, and there was a different topic every month and stuff like that. And we used it, Mandy and I, as more than writing exercises, and then just something to have a credit, like our name, we are published here, and because the more. But honestly, we didn't stick with that for very long. We were too. We ended up putting that to the side to focus on founding Shadowspark and all the other stuff that goes along with that. So. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
I can't speak to too much about that.
No, I mean, it's good to get a little glimpse into this, and after self-publishing, we'll talk about the founding of Shadowspark and the intentions behind that as well. Mike, I'll toss this to you as well, sort of building on what Ben and Krystle have said about their self-publishing journeys. Coming from the origins of 88, then Ghosts of Tomorrow, and the Beyond Redemption and your experiences in trad. Now that you've had so many years of experience in self-publishing, what has that journey been like for you?
I think probably my my self-publishing journey is non-typical. Without Beyond Redemption, without having that trad published book, I think probably not nearly be where I'm at now. Even a sort of let's call it failed trad release by a big 5 publisher is kind of it's a different level from starting off in self-publishing. So The Mirror's Truth was the sequel. My first self-published book was a sequel to something released around the world in the English language, translated into a pile of different languages. Maybe it didn't earn out, but I was sort of publishing the sequel to something that had sold many thousands of copies. And so The Mirror's Truth, like out of the gate, was kind of making for self-pub like good money. Nothing you'd live off. That wasn't like I wasn't going to quit my day job by any stretch there.
Right.
But it was, like it earned out what it cost me to produce, like in no time whatsoever. And then, following that, I sort of, that foot in the door, that like I basically stepped into self-publishing with a fan base already.
Right.
And, you don't usually get to do that. So it was kind of like cheating. But, then I've got that to work on, to build upon.
Yeah.
And it took years. Like, there were many, many years, where I'd sort of like, I'd never bother looking at my bank account, because I set one up just for Amazon sales.
Right.
And, they direct deposit the money in there each month. And there was no fucking point looking at it because it didn't grow quickly. Like I remember looking at it like after about a year, and maybe, I don't know, like this would have been 2016, 2017. And I hadn't looked at it in forever. And there was like maybe $1,100 in there. I was like, woo, yeah. But that kept putting out books, and that, just kept building on that.
Mm-hmm.
So very much, I feel like I cheated.
No, but I don't think it's cheating, in the sense it's like you're making the best out of circumstances that you had your original dream of going into trad pub, and then you pivoted, like I mentioned earlier, and you made the best out of those circumstances. And
I think realistically, I was pivoted.
Ben might think you're cheating
upon by an outside force and went, oh fuck, okay, I'm going this way.
Yeah,
you could have given up though. So like,
exactly.
Oh no, I'm a stubborn bastard. There's no way I was giving up.
And that's why it's not cheating.
Yeah,
it's just in this family we call that determination.
Yeah, exactly. Grit. It's grit. Yeah. I'm really curious though. How much, like, I don't know how this works exactly, but how much would it cost to buy back the rights from like a big 5 publisher for something like Beyond Redemption? Or have you just not even bothered with that?
I have not tried. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah.
I'm just, someday I will. I want them to just sort of like give up on it. When they're like,
I'll take it now, please.
So Mike can come back and it's just
copies.
like, I'm going to give it a cover that matches with the 2 sequels. So
yeah. So like someday I will approach them, but at this point, they're still quietly angry with me most likely. So I'm just leaving them alone.
It's just like, how many years? Like 8 years of just like seething anger and frustration.
Oh yeah. It's
living in their head.
There's got to be a time limit on the contract, though.
Fletcher.
There's got to be a period on the contract.
There's yes and no. So there's a period on the contract, but it's also based on sales. And if it's earning more than X, or selling more than X number of copies, or more than $200 a month, or whatever the fuck it is, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Then it keeps going.
It's in perpetuity.
And unfortunately, it's unfortunately, that's hilarious. Unfortunately, the Grimdark crowd are kind of becoming more and more aware of it, and
So then your success,
it's more popular now than it was when it came out.
Your self-pub success will feed back into it.
Yeah.
It's my self-pub success is hurting me.
And then whatever that like that Harper Voyager grudge, someone's there is just like,
Oh, he's making money now, the bastard.
Fuck that guy,
Fletcher. Yeah. And Anthony, what about you? Since you kind of straddle these 2 worlds of self-pub and traditional publishing, how's that work for you? And what was your sort of intention behind it? The reason for doing some stuff self-pub and then other stuff traditional.
Most of what I've self-pubbed since getting a contract it's been stuff in my own world, but it's novella length. Which some of them, I think most of them have been published in anthologies, because you get approached by editors for anthologies from time to time, and You know, I'd write a novella set in one of my worlds, and it would appear in the anthology. Then after a while, the rights revert back to me, and I can self-publish it. That's generally how it works. And I usually do one self-published thing a year. That's how it's turned out over the last 10 years, anyway. And it's a lot of work. I couldn't do it all the time. Doing it for a novella is a lot easier, I think, than doing it for a full-length novel. The closest I've come to a full-length novel thing is doing the omnibus of my Slab City Blues Sci-Fi Noir series. That was a chunky tome to do myself, and it took ages. And it's been through 3 different covers and all of that kind of thing. And, I always say the advantage of self-publishing is that you do everything yourself, and the disadvantage is you do everything yourself.
You do everything.
There's no one else to blame if it goes wrong, and you have to. It costs money to do it well. It costs money. You have to hire skilled freelancers, and you have to pay them on time. I think that's a tip. Not that I've done this, but I do hear freelancers complaining a lot about people not paying them on time. So always do that. But finding good people who are available in the freelance space is difficult. I've found it difficult, especially when it comes to artists. If they're any good, they're always booked up for the next 6 months to a year. So finding someone is never particularly easy. Fortunately, I have people I work with regularly and all that. It's difficult, but I like doing it. And in terms of the money I make from it, I couldn't live on it. It's a nice bit of extra money that comes in, but it's not paying all the bills or anything. But I think in terms of fan service, giving fans of various series another story in that world is something that they like in terms of that kind of thing. And in terms of marketing, I find having a mailing list for self-published work is the thing that works the best. Facebook ads and Amazon ads and all that stuff, I know they work for some people. They don't seem to work for me. Or at least maybe I'm doing them wrong, but when I've tried them, they've never really earned back the money I've paid into them, especially Facebook ads. And I think it's because I'm advertising something that's short. Novellas are difficult to sell anyway, and because they're tied into a traditionally published series, it's kind of hard to sort of advertise off the back of that. Well, at least I find it. So most of my sales come from committed fans, people who are on my mailing list or follow me on social media and so. I'd say my only real tip for self-publishing is have a mailing list. But I'm sure that everyone is going to say the same thing.
No, but there's more to glean in there for sure. I mean, I think the fact that you approach it from the angle of expanding on the worlds that you've already created and giving fans these complementary novellas or what have you is something that we've seen it with Brandon Sanderson. Sorry, Michael, I mentioned his name. And other authors who add to the portfolio of a specific world that people really, really love and enjoy. And if there's a fan base for that, then those complementary works can in a sense market themselves a lot of the time, because people are so invested in it that they want more of it. And we'll get into marketing and that kind of stuff, but Ben's shaking his head. I'll toss it to you now, buddy.
I take it.
In terms of how you approach certain things, like we'll start with cover art and design. And if anyone's interested, I did an episode back in January, episode 12, about SFF cover art and design with a bunch of really, really amazing authors, some traditional, some who are freelance, like Felix Ortiz or Luke Tarzian. So Ben, if you want to jump in on sort of the discussion of cover art and design and how you approach that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, where you've got the 3 areas of publishing, where it's just not self-publishing, it's the polishing of it, the actual publishing and figuring out all these platforms and what this means and what that means, and then the whole gigantic promotion side of things, which is like, which doesn't suit all our mindsets. But yeah, the publishing, the polishing, the first process once the manuscript's complete and you're actually trying to make it look like a book, is got to be my favorite, and it's probably a favorite of a lot of authors in general, because the main thing is you're turning it from a jumbled word manuscript into something that looks like a book, and obviously nothing ever really looks more like a book until it's got a cover on it. So yeah, it's one of my favorite processes. It's one of my favorite times. I'm usually kind of working on it before I've even finished the book, or sometimes we'll have a cover kind of made ready to go and it almost informs the book sort of thing. I actually, the last one I wrote, which is Demon's Reign, should be coming out later this year. The cover was made way before I'd finished a lot of the book. And so there are things on the cover that I was like, all right, I'll write them in. Like these little creatures. And I was like, well, they don't exist, but I can make them exist. So I went back and just changed the whole book and wrote this thing called the Navic into the book, which was great fun. But yeah, so in terms of the process that I go, someone's not usually making it for me, because that was kind of working with a publisher. For me, normally I'll have my stable of artists that I prefer to work with, and that kind of stable, it's just, a group of people I've either worked before, would love to work with, or, have done different things for me in the past. And so, yeah, I'll usually kind of figure out, well, what is the thing that I'm producing? What kind of book is it? Will I need kind of graphical art, full illustration, something that a designer can do? And then I'll reach out to the appropriate freelancer and just essentially get it done. The key with cover design for me is providing a really good brief. Some artists you work with, you mentioned Felix, sometimes he's just so good and he's just got such an inner mind, sort of vision of something that you can just say. I think Rob J. Hayes mentioned this the other day on Facebook or some social media, just saying like, I just said man in field go, and Felix just creates this most beautiful piece of art and stuff like that. So sometimes if you're working with the right professional, or really esteemed professional, of which there are many out there, then it can be very easy. But I always like to give a brief. My briefs are pages long, to be honest. I'll do a snippet of the book or snippets of the book, because I'm quite a descriptive writer anyway, so it helps. I'll just describe the scene in just normal English, broken terrible English, and then I'll find other covers or other pieces of art, screenshots from movies, lots of different references, and just put a giant mosaic, mood board, whatever you'd like to call it, together and send that off. That's how I also work with my illustrator for the new written illustrated edition I'm doing as well. So that's a full PDF of briefs that are sent to someone for the interior illustrations, not even the book cover. And then it's all about kind of looking within genre to a certain point without looking too odd, but also kind of switching it up. There's the classic fantasy person with hood or cowl with back to viewer with giant monster or flame in hand. We've all done it. And also it does immediately say fantasy, but he's facing forward.
He's facing good. Us, Anthony. He's facing us.
He's good. That's it. The amount of books I've got, actually just thinking about it, on my shelf by me or other people with that sort of format. But it's a format that's been proven to work. So I think a lot of people are messing around with that. Seen some amazing covers. Django Wexler's cover, James Islington's covers, kind of taking that, and they're some of my favorites in general, just because they kind of mess around with that. Anthony, your cover as well is fantastic. And to be honest, Ghost of Tomorrow as well. Oof, when I saw that as well, it's before I kind of really made friends with you, Mike. And I was just like, that is sick. So facing outward works. But aside from that, it's about choosing, for instance, colors, themes, branding, anything like that, and kind of putting all the finishing touches to it. And of course, taking that original flat piece of art and turning it into a cover spread as well, which the designer or the artist could normally do for you as well. So it's very much just about preparation for me, finding the right person and just trusting them and letting their skills and expertise make me a fantastic cover, and then share it around wide and far. It's great. It really does make it look like a book as well.
And then, like Anthony said, pay them on time.
Pay your creatives.
That's how to be.
Excuse.
Pay them immediately.
That's how to be develop a very trusting and long-lasting professional friendship. Is just pay people on time.
I've paid people I don't even like or have even. This is no one in the industry we know at all. This is way when I started. But I work with an editor who will remain nameless, who I haven't heard from in about 8 years, or haven't even seen around in 8 years. They did an absolutely terrible job, and we got into a proper argument. And I still paid them full amount. but pay your creators. If someone's done a job,
grudgingly pay them full.
Grudgingly, but it's professional to a point. We did have an agreement contract.
Yeah.
And some people just clashed. So yeah, happens. But
Yeah,
pay everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And also, this sort of process also applies to, sometimes you find an artist who also does typography and stuff like that, sort of like the design of the title and the author's name and that kind of thing, or even interior design, someone like Luke Tarzian, who's kind of like full package. And then other times, in Felix's case, he does the actual cover illustration, and then someone like Sean T. King would come in and do the typography and the layout and design and that sort of detail. Krystle, I'll toss this to you if you want to sort of get into how you went about doing the cover design process for Legacy of the Brightwash.
Oh, I got like mad lucky where we did a anthology called Dark Ends back in 2019. And Justine, who was putting it, or who was kind of hosting it, dragged her husband into it. So he does marketing for ad copy or art for ad copy and stuff like that. And so she's like, "You're doing this, and do it now." And I was just so blown away by I don't have one on the shelf, but I was just so blown away by what he did, representing about six different stories. And so I was like, if ever I self-publish, I'd love to work with him. And so I did self-publish, and I said, "Hey, Brad, how much would you charge for a cover?" And then beyond that, it was just like kind of trying to nail down the vibe, because I know as far as fantasy goes, I'm straddling a lot of different lines, and I didn't want to promise people an epic fantasy because that's not what I wrote. I needed to carry over like that Victorian mystery vibe. So like Ben said, I pulled a bunch of covers that were really creepy from Victorian type mysteries. That one of them was like morbidity in children in 1875 or something like that. But the cover was so stunning. Krystle. Oh yeah, it was great. I mean, you read the book, Adrian.
Morbidity appears very, very often.
So it was all about. There's that silly line about not judging the book by the cover, but I don't know. Maybe that was before, when covers were boring. Yeah. Now it's marketing. It's the first thing people see. It's the thing people remember, and it makes promises. And you have to know what promises you're making, and you have to know which promises you should not make, because I've seen a lot of people come in on books saying, "This isn't what I expected," and I'm not. At first, I didn't really know where they got that expectation, but then if you look, like if you put a Felix Ortiz art on like a romance story, people are going to go in expecting a Michael Fletcher novel, and or Rob Haight, so you have to know
Michael R. Fletcher's romance novel. I want that right now.
That's what the R stands for.
That's what
Michael Romance Fletcher.
I would pay money for my Fletcher romance novel.
He writes a good sex scene. He's blushing now, but he writes a good sex scene. But you have to know what you're going to promise, and you have to know what you don't want to promise. And so pulling competitive covers is really important. And having someone that you can communicate with is really important, because I dumped a lot of shit on Brad, and he was like, "Yeah, okay." And then the first thing he sent me back, it's like, holy shit, this guy understood what I was saying. By some miracle, my madness then became an amazing cover that people are still remarking on, how much it stands out and how memorable it is. And so that's something you need to figure out, like what is important to what you're trying to promise, and how can you communicate that in an image.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, now more than ever, you have to judge books by their covers, because that's your first impression. I think it was on Wizards, Warriors, and Words, Dirk was saying it's like the first impression. I think it was an episode that you guys were talking about blurbs and stuff like that, but it's like first impression is cover art, you know, and then you get into the blurb and synopses, and then it's like if someone's interested based on the promises that that's laying out, they might open the book or they might purchase it or what have you.
Or they look at the reviews.
Exactly. Yeah. And also it's like, you know, you were mentioning comparing it to other titles that are sort of within your genre. You know, it's really important to kind of like look on, you know, Amazon or other book sites that display like thumbnails, because sometimes it's like someone's vision of a book cover is like, cool, I got this big hardcover or this paperback or whatever, and it's this big. But then you go onto Amazon and it's scrunched
and
down
you can't
into a
see
little
anything.
thumbnail.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's like, how
how
well does the detail and the information get conveyed based on the perspective, whether it's a thumbnail or whether it's actually physically in somebody's hands, you know? And Mike, I'll toss this to you if you want to throw in some last comments about cover art, and then also we'll get into things like editors. Like how do you find an editor? Do you build up a bank? What are some of the different editors that you can get in touch with, from line editing to copy editing to you know, proofreading, or I mean, I can't even remember all the different types of editors there are, but obviously in self-publishing,
lots.
you know, in traditional, Anthony, you said there's like these multiple passes of editing that go on. Those are different people a lot of the time. And in self-publishing, you have to be very particular about who you choose, because you might not necessarily be able to afford 3 editors to go through 3 different aspects of this book. So go ahead for it, Mike.
Oh my God, that question.
Give it to me, man.
Right. Okay. So I got very lucky with my artists. I needed an artist for Ghosts of Tomorrow, and my wife said, "Oh, my nephew does art." And I thought, fuck. Fine. I'll talk to him. And met him at, I don't know, like a Thanksgiving or something, and talked to him, and I was still kind of like, oh my God, this kid. It turns out, so that's John Anthony DiGiovanni, who did 2 covers for me before becoming so famous that I could no longer afford him. And now he does big trad covers. And then was looking for an artist for Smoke and Stone, and Felix, who had, I think at that point, not done any book covers, approached me and said, I kind of want to get into cover art, because he was a graphic designer. And I was like, oh, okay. So he was like, he sent me like a couple of versions of like things, ideas, and they were insane. They were like crazy good. And so that was 2017 or something. And Felix has now quit his day job. All my artists become more famous than I am and more successful.
That's your skill, Mike.
Now I am booking him for covers that I haven't, for books I haven't started writing yet. I'm just like, August 2023, I'm going to need you for a cover. Put me in your fucking calendar. That's mine. I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
And he's insane. Much like Ben. So with Felix, I write all my self-pub covers are scenes from the book. So with Felix, I will send him 2 or 3 scenes, and then he gets to choose which one he thinks will make the best cover, because he's an artist and I am not. And whatever he picks that's the cover. And there's minimal back and forth. I'll get bitchy about details because I'm a control freak, but basically he sends me.
No way.
Yeah, he sends me like his first drafts. I mean, his rough sketches, his crayon sketch
are amazing.
I'm already like, holy fuck!
Yeah,
like, it is so good. Anyway, that's how I work.
Mm-hmm. And then what about editing? How do you? I mean, you sort of like build up your staple of artists, but then with editing, is it sort of a similar thing?
Right. So I've used Sarah Chorn to edit. I think 6 out of almost all of my books. I get Sarah to edit. I've kind of you're always trying to get better, right? And I've reached the point now where what she's sending back is mostly line edit level stuff. Like if she catches like continuity errors or something, she'll mention them. But my edits tend to be like just line edit stuff. Because mostly I'm like, I've got the story I want to tell, and that's the way I'm going to do it. And I'm not really looking for somebody to come back at that point and tell me that, oh, this doesn't work. It's like, fuck off. It is the way I want it. That said,
my ego can't handle it.
I know. That said, I do work with, I've got a couple of really good beta readers. So like it's been through all of that stuff before, and happily they're volunteers.
Yeah.
So I don't have to pay them, and I just heap abuse on them. And
in return, they heap abuse on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get to be mean back. So that's kind of how I work.
Cool. Anyone else want to get in on the sort of editing discussion? I guess we could also include beta readers in there as well.
Yeah, well, I paid for a couple of different. Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was just going to say, I don't use
Krystle,
beta.
we'll come back.
It's really not that important.
For Michael, it is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Krystle.
I paid for a couple of different kinds of edits on Brightwash and then again on Brick and Bone. Brightwash, my first reach out was some sensitivity readers, just because the main character is coded Indigenous, and I just wanted to avoid the really empty tropes that we see in Indigenous characters in fantasy, and so I got, just by chance, the person that I was paired with had just started at the service that I found. It's called Salt and Sage Books. They do editing and sensitivity reading and everything. And what they gave back to me went beyond the scope of just a sensitivity read. They have an incredible eye for story structure and beats. So I ended up with kind of a developmental edit from them on and I ended up with an amazing friend out of it, just because we kind of see eye to eye on so many different creative things, so that when they challenge me, I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. So then and then after that, through the same service, I found somebody who did line edits, and she was amazing as well. So anyone on the market for sensitivity readers, please check out Salt and Sage Books. They're fantastic. And then when I went to Brick and Bone, I went back to that first sensitivity reader because they have wilderness survival training. So I sent them a big section of out in the bush, which goes beyond my
out in the boonies,
scope.
Krystle.
Further out than I am.
I don't know about that.
And so again, they sent me back like just a list of things that I could do better as far as wilderness survival went, but also there was like some really good questions about the overall story that I was trying to tell. So I again hit the lottery for, I always feel like whenever I send something to them, I get back way more than I paid for, and they deserve a raise. But you definitely have to be open to being challenged and open to listening. But then also you need a clear vision of what you're trying to say, because some of the things that they suggested go against what I was trying to say. And so in a conversation with them, I was able to figure out, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, but this is what I'm trying to say. And we kind of like sort it out. But in considering the suggestion, I was able to have a really clear vision of why it was wrong, so that when people mention it,
right,
if they didn't like it, it's like, yeah, well, that's the choice I made.
It was like them questioning you gave you the headspace to question yourself and figure out like, how do I actually want to present this, or how do I explain it, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also like it's a big book, and I did that for a reason. But I had to look at that, and I had to know, like, okay, some people aren't going to like how long it is, but does it fit with what I'm trying to do?
Right.
Yes or no? And I had to think about that for a while and let it let that decision come really strong, because so now when I get reviews saying this book is so long, it's like, yeah, well, I did that on purpose for a reason. Deal with it.
I say it all the time. It's a chonky boy. It's like,
a fat,
I could just do like bicep curls with your book, you know?
Especially the hardcover.
The hardcover is fucking huge.
The hardcover is 2.5 pounds. It's a big book.
It's a chonky boy. Cool. And then I'll toss this to you. I think this is something that with self-pub is a bit tricky for some people, you know, distribution methods and getting your book out there. You know, there are so many different platforms. You know, there's, you know, the Amazon Kindle store, but you could also go with Kindle Unlimited, but then you're restricted to having your book there and nowhere else. But then you could also not go Kindle Unlimited. I think it's Kindle Unlimited. Did I say Kindle Limited?
Yep.
So it's Kindle
Unlimited.
Unlimited. It's limited. There's not that much.
In which
Very small store.
Very small. And then there are different methods of doing, you know, print on demand and that kind of stuff. People could also, if they want to, hire someone to convert their book into an ebook format, or you could use something like Vellum and convert it yourself. So Ben, what's been your experience with that? And if you want to elaborate a little bit more on distribution and stuff.
Yeah. So once I've got, the finished product, and it's, you know, got to cover everything. Yeah, I use a formatter. I've been using the same guy for the last about 10 or 11, maybe 12 years now. It's a company called BB eBooks, and they're just fantastic. Cheap, fast, incredible work. They do internal formatting for paperbacks, as well as or typesetting for paperbacks, as well as the internal ebook formatting. I do the forget which was latter and former now. So I let Paul take all of the ebooks. So BB eBooks handles all of the ebooks, even though they do interior typesetting. And I actually taught myself that. So I've been using Pages to do that for the last forever, to be honest, because it was something that was quite time consuming. And like Mike, I'm just a really kind of just annoying stickler for like detail. Like, does that have an extra space? Is that 10 point or 11 point? I am like, it takes me ages, but I love it. It kind of speaks to my kind of OCD, my design, sort of my love for design, even though I'm no artist. So yeah, I do the paperbacks. Paul and BV eBooks do the ebooks, which is great because that involves either a tool like Vellum, which I can't be bothered to learn necessarily, and plus device requirements, device options, devices themselves. Even KDP is changing. They've recently switched from one file format to another. And they instead of want Mobi files, they want EPUB files on the KDP dashboard. So it's something you're kind of constantly aware of. And there's too much shit going on, to be honest, in my own life, never mind my author life, and in the industry as a whole, for me to be like, okay, what device requirements have changed in the last month or two? Right. So yeah, that's why I use a professional, because that's why you use professionals. It's his job. He does a fantastic job of it. And then, so yeah, I just simply do the rest myself. And then, yeah, my approach used to be wide, as it's known. So I would go to KDP, Kobo, Google, Nook, Apple, and I would manually upload into, their platforms and distribute on their stores. It's a lot of admin work, especially if you want to change, you notice a typo in your blurb. You've got to go to 5 or 6 different platforms, log in, change this, save that, export, all this sort of stuff. So it can be a lot of pain when you've got multiple books, multiple titles, or multiple changes to make. It's also, for marketing, it spreads the marketing a little bit. Do you run Facebook ads for Kobo? Do you run AMS ads only for Amazon? Do you try Google ads and YouTube ads for your Google books? It's it's a lot of different facets piled on, and it kind of increases by factors with each book you get. So for me, it was a lot of admin going on, and I chose to actually go exclusive with Amazon, and it increased my income, I would say, by a factor of 2. It kind of doubled it, because when you go obviously exclusive with Amazon, you have the page reads. So you get paid roughly at the moment 0.0042 cents a page, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't. I think it might have actually dropped down this month as well. But either way, that's just paid on, how many people read your pages. So if you're getting a lot of people, reading your books a day on Kindle Unlimited, you can make more per full read than you can on the actual sale price of an ebook. So It is kind of, yeah, it's quite lucrative if you're writing longer books, longer series. It's very lucrative if you've got bundles that people are picking up very quickly as well. And so for me, going exclusive with Amazon does work quite well for me. I write epic fantasy. The last two books I wrote were almost over 200,000. I think one was. So yeah, if I've got a lot of Kindle Unlimited readers and you can target them and find them, build up, a fan base there, then yeah, that's how self-publishing becomes truly lucrative. As well as the unit sales, you're getting page reads. And it's just, that's how some people are making six figures a year just on, page reads and more. And so, yeah, it's kind of, it's working for me at the moment, but things change. Amazon's per page or page, KEMP is kind of it's, decreasing. The fund's sometimes getting smaller. It fluctuates. And, some people are turning away from Amazon. It's not the best company in the world. It's fantastic for authors because it puts us right in front of the reader. But, there's a lot of practices of Amazon and a lot of things people don't like about it. So, yeah, a lot of people, are also selling on their own sites right now, which I know some people are making a chunk of change out of. Just cutting out the middleman altogether, taking 100% rather than 70%. So, yeah, that's an option. With paperbacks and hardbacks and physical copies, I think to me the ideal situation is using the same ISBN, the same interior file, slightly different cover spread PDFs, going to KDP print, and publishing your paperbacks or hardbacks on there, and then publishing the same files, same ISBNs on Ingram Spark. So you're using two platforms at the same time, and Amazon KDP just looks after the Amazon stuff, and Ingram looks after the rest of the world. So it enables you, it gives you the possibility to be ordered into bookshops, stocked in bookshops, while having Prime and being always in stock on Amazon. So yeah, just another upload, slightly higher cost, one or two more files, but either way, it's the ideal situation, I think, personally speaking.
And the consistency you found is like, from feedback from readers, like the consistency in terms of print quality and stuff like that has been good.
Yeah, KDP used to be a bit behind Ingram, but now they're kind of, I would say, caught
They're
up.
pretty even now.
Yeah, I can't tell. There's one tiny line sometimes you get on the cover of the outside of a KDP book just with the fold of the front cover. Right. That's usually how you can tell without looking at it, But the quality, the matte, the paper quality, the printing quality, there's no real differences. A few different things you can and can't do. Like, for instance, Ingram has like a jacketed hardcover, which you can have now, which has the art within it, and it's quite good. So yeah, KDP can't do that yet. So yeah, there's pros and cons, but if you're looking to print a load of stock or do slightly more special items like hardbacks, Ingram Spark's got that benefit, but there's no reason you can't do both. Cool.
And Krystle, you want to get in here?
Yeah, the Ingram has ever so slightly thinner paper. So for those of us that write really long books, there's a cap on the Amazon paperbacks. They can only go up to 772 pages, but Ingram can go up to 1,000 pages. So, and I'm at 662 with the first book. So yeah, he chunky. So yeah, like there's some little fine tuning details that really depend on what you're looking for. But, most of my income since SPFBO started, or since the finalist round of SPFBO, has been Kindle Unlimited. I think the SPFBO crowd, everybody's got Kindle Unlimited, and I make more on a full read through Kindle than I do on
an individual sale of a book.
Yeah. So yeah, it's but having the various options is really helpful. Although I don't make very much on Ingram because of the wholesale discount. I think I make like $1 a book or something.
Yeah, they're getting slightly more expensive as well.
They are, yeah. I had to
fuel surcharges, paper shortages. I mean, it's a global issue. So yeah, I can see us doing a lot more ebooks and audiobooks over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think going forward I would only do the hardcover through Ingram just because and then the paperback would be Amazon, so long as my books can stay short enough. I can't the cap is stressing me out.
Krystle, you have a hard time keeping your word count, don't I?
Yeah, I talk a lot. Surprise, surprise.
That's all good. Does anyone have any final comments on things like distribution or just on self-publishing in general? You want to get in here? No? Okay.
No.
Well, Jessica, I'm going to toss this over to you. Thank you for your patience. We're going to round out this panel talking about indie publishing. So we've touched on traditional and self-pub, and now we'll shine a spotlight on indie, which is smaller publishers that are outside of the big five heavyweights like Penguin Random House or Hachette, HarperCollins, etc. So Jessica, since you co-founded Shadowspark Publishing, do you want to share a bit about your publishing journey and how the company was founded and sort of like what you've learned about indie publishing and the benefit of this publishing path?
Sure. Well, Mandy and I, originally were looking into trad publishing for our own series. And we were going through, the querying, the getting agents and all of that stuff. And it is, a lengthy process. Every step of the way is very lengthy. And in the midst of all of that, she was listening. She's a rabid podcast listener. So she was listening to a bunch of different podcasts and all of that. And I'm sorry, I don't have the names of any of them.
No, it's okay.
But she came to me and was like, so, because at the time, this was, I want to say 2017, 2018. The self-publishing market, the industry, is so different now than it was even a few years ago. Not only the everything available to self-published authors, but the perception of self-publishing, because at the time there was, at least to my mind, this preconception of people who can't really make it are the ones who self-publish, which is not accurate, but that was kind of how it was thought of. At least that's how it seemed to me. And I didn't know much about it. And she was going into the different options that we had, as far as the amount of control you retain over your work. And, because we basically founded Shadowspark to publish our own series because I am a massive control freak. And
as I think many of these panelists are.
There seems to be a theme among
I really do think that you have to have that kind of attention to detail and requirement to have control of everything in order to put up with all of the bullshit that goes into putting a book together, there's so much that goes into publishing even a single book. Which we have learned. We didn't know. But so then self-publishing came on, it entered the discussion, and the more we thought about it, and she came to me and was like, okay, how about a third option? What if we just started our own house? And I was like, what do you mean? How do you just, who does that? And she was like, we do. And I was like, okay. And it really was just about that simple. We're in Texas, unfortunately. And you can get, file something, and I'm sorry, she does all of the technical stuff. I'm the creative director. I do the covers and talk to people. I don't know the minutia, but there's a thing you can do where you can send the state $300 and form a corporation and and all of that stuff. So technically I'm the CEO of a corporation, which is hilarious to me. And so we decided that, at least for our experience in going through and querying and looking for agents and all of that stuff, and there was interest, but we came to realize that we just weren't willing to give up even an iota of control over any step of the process. And so we decided that we're most likely not alone in feeling that way. And another thing that was difficult during queries was trying to find comp titles and genres and all of that shit. My series is unique. That's why I wrote it. If it was just like anything else, I wouldn't bother putting in all the time. So all of that stuff. And I figured we thought that there had to be more people like that out here, who maybe don't have, because she and I have a weird conglomeration of skills and talents and whatnot that work really well into running a publishing house. She does all of the formatting, she does all the interior shit. I do all the cover design. I do the website. I do all this other stuff. At the beginning, we both did edits. Now we do have a team of editors who are also Shadowspark authors who work with us. We have a second cover designer, things like that. Things have kind of grown over the last few years as far as that goes. But at the beginning, and still for the most part, it's just the two of us. Mm-hmm. And we have 19 authors, including the two of us. I suppose we count. And that's pretty much it. We decided to form a house. If we were going to do this, we were going to do it because from a writer's perspective, because we're writers first. Right. Before we were ever publishers or anything like that. So if I was to design a house, what would I want it to be? What kind of house would draw me as a writer to say, yeah, okay, no, these people seem pretty cool. I want to work with them. Mm-hmm. And honestly, from a business perspective, I don't know how smart that was, because we very much think of the writers and develop relationships with them. And it's never been about the money. Like Shadowspark, we don't actually bring in a whole lot of money that we keep for ourselves. It all goes back into the business. Our authors also keep a far bigger percentage of the royalties and whatnot. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. But yeah, no, we thought that maybe we weren't alone in wanting it is, it kind of bridges the gap between self-publishing and traditional publishing, wherein our authors, and it's kind of difficult because I can really only speak for Shadowspark, because all the indie houses are so different in the way that they approach pretty much every aspect of it. So, but with us, we work on developing relationships with our authors. We're purposefully pretty small. I don't have any inclination of blowing up and taking over the publishing world or any.
Back to Big Six.
No, thank you. No, not at all. I don't want that at all. I would rather have a decent number of people who we build our careers together and work with them. And basically, when it comes to who we pick, it's if genre matters not to me. Word count, I like chonky books, so none of that stuff. All of the things that kind of irritated us about other ways in which we could publish, we kind of just created our own thing. We're like, fuck it, it's our house. I can do what I want. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's kind of how that went.
You brought this up, and this is something I wanted to touch on, is like you have this more intimate approach to how you work with your authors, how you develop relationships with them. I think on your website, it's sort of like a 50-50 between the house and the authors, more or less, in terms of
as far as a royalty breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then on top of that, it's like, how do you work with the authors in terms of doing things like editing and designing and then, marketing a book and that kind of stuff?
Sure. Well, we do 2 rounds of edits with each book. One is usually more developmental and the other is more line editing, grammatical stuff. Mm-hmm. There's some, crossover, obviously, with all of that. But each one goes through, and each round of edits, the editor has the manuscript for a month, and then it goes back to the author for them to, make corrections or talk to the editor about all the notes and whatnot that go through it, and they have it for a month, and then the process starts over with a different editor. And usually, one of the things we do is we have a Discord, a Shadowspark Discord with a ton of channels that our authors are all a part of. So there is constant conversation going on in the Discord. There's, anything from beta readers, if you're working on something, you can send, they connect that way. to a complaint department, if they just need to bitch about something, and a panic room, and an anime channel, because myself and a bunch of my authors are huge anime nerds.
Yeah.
And, there's all these different aspects. There's a room because a bunch of them are teachers. I have that one muted because I don't care. But they can talk about stuff there, so we really do have, as far as I know, it's very different from trad publishing. In the end, when it comes to cover design, I'd say 95% of the covers. I do have another cover designer, our author Mariah Norris, who's coming on and is taking on certain trilogies here and there, just schedule depending.
Mm-hmm.
And our authors, when a cover's coming up, I reach out to them and I'm like, okay, what are you thinking? What do you want? Show me, and some of them send little sketches in, or some of them have commissioned artwork on their own. And if they want to do that, I'm more than happy to use it. It's really dependent on each project and each author as to what route we go. I always do all the typography and all of that stuff, and the blurb and all of that. But they have final say, basically. Because again, we approach this from a writer's perspective, and this is your baby. This is like, I'm helping. We just want to refine it and make you shine as best as you can, and make sure your voice is exactly what you want it to be, rather than maybe what you think it was at the beginning of the editing process.
Right.
And the cover plays a big role in that too. So I have my own ideas and concepts, and we will workshop it out, and I'll send them, here are my thoughts, here's some mock-ups, what do you think, what do you like, what do you not like? Because in the end, I want them to be proud of the work that's being put out. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's our house, but it's theirs. Like, that is so important to me, that whatever the project is, it's exactly what they always wanted it to be, as best as possible. So
yeah,
that's kind of how we approach that.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the publication of the book, we've talked about like distribution and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about the distribution process of, something that a self-published author would do themselves, in terms of, getting the different formats and putting them onto the different websites, or doing print on demand and that kind of stuff? How do you guys handle that at Shadowspark?
Yeah, that is all. That's Mandy's domain. We do paperbacks and ebooks through Amazon. We've done a few things through Ingram Spark. We're kind of the problem is, those are really the big two options for whether it's self-publishing or indie publishing,
right.
And I know we have one of our authors, Dan Fitzgerald, he's really looking into other distribution options and what's out there. Like, we need somebody who's really, both Amazon and Ingram Spark have positives and negatives in accessing the platform and working with it and making changes,
right.
in all of these different things. So, we're moving into audiobooks eventually. Right now, because we're a small house, we don't have the funds to pay for everybody to have an audiobook. I think we released like 32 books last year. Across our authors, and we don't have the funds for that. But that's something that, if they wanted to put the costs up front, that would be a different contract and far different royalties and all of that. And eventually we want to get to that point, which is another reason to keep it kind of small as far as our author count and whatnot. Yeah, and some of the authors really want the hardcovers, and so Ingram Spark is an option for that. Amazon says they have a hardcover option, but it's not that great. No, I don't know. It's kind of a self-published, trad-published, weird conglomeration of things that we've kind of made up as we've gone along and learned what has worked and learned what hasn't worked, and just keeping in contact with the authors. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so much more to this than we had any idea.
Yeah.
When we
And
got started.
from your perspective, what's like the biggest benefit of sort of bridging that gap between self-pub and traditional publishing?
Well, I think that a lot of authors who maybe don't want to go the traditional route for whatever reason, and I do like that we're having this discussion, because all of these options are absolutely viable in their own way. You know, there's positives and negatives, and writers and authors, creatives of any sort, are mercurial at best, and what is going to suit somebody is not going to suit someone else. So to have these options is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally forgot what you asked me. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
It's okay. The benefit of sort of bridging the gap between
The reason I'm here. Yeah, well, because a lot of authors might not have the funds to be able to hire artists or editors or all of that stuff up front. It is a lot of upfront cost, and our authors don't pay for any of that, like, at least for us. When they sign with us, you know, we split the royalties 50-50. We do some of the marketing, but we provide edits, we provide a cover, we provide, you know, access to and exposure on social media and on the website and all of that other stuff. So if someone doesn't have those funds to be able, because I think Krystle said, you know, like $4,000, that's absolutely, you know, a lot of stuff goes into this. So yeah, I think that if they want to retain at least more control than probably they would in trad publishing, but don't have the funds or the inclination to learn all of these various programs and platforms and all the minutia and how to read the metadata and how to do this and all, you know, all those different things, we can take care of that. We'll do all of that other stuff, and we'll work together, and we're both putting in a lot of effort, so we just split it down the middle as far as whatever comes in. That's how we look at it.
Yeah, that's good. And then in terms of, you know, earlier we were talking with Anthony and Mike about sort of like the contractual side of things. You know, we mentioned the 50-50 royalty split. I imagine there's not like an upfront advance or anything like that. It's more so it's like this is like a mutual project that we're going to put into the world together with our different skills coming becoming unified. So how does that sort of work in terms of like the contractual side of things, or like the rights and that sort of stuff?
Well, as far as the rights go, we retain that they basically give us the rights to, you know, to their books or their trilogies. We've offered contracts both for a single book or a standalone, or, you know, the entire series, depending on the author and where they are in the process. You know, Valerie Storm, one of our authors, we contracted her for an 8-book series because they're mostly drafted and they were fantastic. And the first one comes out next month. But it's all dependent. We basically retain the rights for 5 years. And and the contract is set to automatically renew unless they submit something in writing 30 days ahead of time that they don't blah, blah, blah. You know, we have had authors who decide for one reason or another that they would rather go the self-publishing route. And you know, again, as writers, we're not going to hold your work hostage. We have issued rights reversals, certainly without charging anybody. Like, I only want people in my house who want to be there, who enjoy what we're doing, who are part of this thing that we're building. Right. And honey, if it doesn't fit for you, I want you to be happy and you go succeed however that happens to be. Here, take your rights. I'm not going to hold them hostage. It's fucking gross to me. So, like, no, you please, with all of my love, go. Yep. And, you know, stay friends on Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean that's a good approach to it. And it's like, Mike, we were talking with you earlier. It's like Beyond Redemption, Harper Voyager, you know, whatever grudges they have or whatever is going on behind the scenes. It's like that's a fucking tricky thing, is to get your rights back from these bigger publishers, because the contracts are obviously, they have like the teams of lawyers and stuff like that who create these contracts that are much more strict, but it kind of needs to be more strict given the the nature of their
scale.
size and the distribution and everything that goes into it behind the scenes before a book is published. Does anyone have any questions for Jessica if they're curious about indie publishing or what Shadowspark is doing? Have you got anything on your mind?
No, I just said I have no questions. It was all explained so well.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Jessica, any final comments about sort of like the indie publishing space, or perhaps like what you'd like to see more of from indie pub in the future?
I mean, it's such an interesting industry to be in. There's houses popping up all over now. I would suggest that authors, prospective authors, please do your research carefully. Not everybody is in it for the same reasons, and every house is set up differently, but there's definitely a lot of houses out there that expect you to pay to publish with them. And
do not pay to print, please.
No, there's tons of options out there. Just please, like I said, research some of these places, go on their website, go to their social media, find people who are associated with them and reach out to them. When we're not going to be opening for queries in the way we have in the past anymore. But when we would have people ask if it's okay to reach out to our authors. Absolutely. Go find out what it's actually like to be working with these people before you sign over the rights or give them any money or anything like that. And I'm not trying to sound like a horror story or anything, but there are definitely people out there who will take your property and your money and call themselves an indie house. And
there are a lot of horror stories from publishing in general. It's like I've seen it over and over and over again. So I'm really thankful that all of you were able to offer up your perspectives, because I think it's worthwhile for anybody who's getting into writing. Like you said, Jessica, do the research, ask questions, just put in the time before you really push your work out there. Because if it's something that's meaningful to you enough that you spent hours and hours and hours creating this world, writing down the words, refining it, all that stuff, don't fuck yourself over.
Exactly.
By going down a path.
Thing will wait. It will
exactly.
come.
Exactly.
Don't rush it. Seriously.
Yeah. Take the time to give your work the avenue that it deserves, that will most benefit whatever you've created, and I'll toss this to Anthony first. I kind of wanted to close this out just with a little bit of, clearing up any misconceptions. If you have, Anthony, a major misconception that you see people talking about traditional publishing that you just like to critique or counter.
Yeah, it's just an observation, really, and I don't think anyone here is like this, but I do see people setting up in camps, with I'm an indie publisher, I'm a self-publisher, and traditional publishing is evil. I don't, just from my experience, I don't think traditional publishing is evil. Certainly the people who work in traditional publishing aren't evil. They're not out to steal from you and screw you over or anything. It's a business that sells books. And I'm fully aware that if I got to a point where I stopped selling books, they wouldn't publish me anymore, because that would be a business decision to do that. I hope we'd part as friends at that point. But yeah, it's just the idea that, they are big corporations, and all big corporations are problematic to one level or another. But I don't think the people who work in publishing are problematic, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in terms of the editors and publicists that I've been in touch with just doing this podcast, everyone is very welcoming and passionate about the stuff that they're putting out there, because clearly, they love science fiction and fantasy enough to work for a sci-fi and fantasy publisher or what have you. So for sure, I completely agree, Anthony. And Mike, I'll toss this to you. If there's, a big misconception that you want to counter about self-pub, or from your experience with traditional publishing as well.
I think the wake-up call for me, which the lesson I learned, unfortunately, too late, people seem to think that with the big five, the big four, however many there are, with the trad publishers, that they are doing all of the marketing, and that as a writer, all you're doing is writing books. That's not the way it works at all. If you're not out there slinging your stuff, it's not going to sell.
Yeah.
When I signed with Harper Voyager, I mean, I had no experience with anything. So I was like, yes, I have a publisher. I got down, I started writing the next book. I was kind of aware of social media, but not really. I wasn't putting a ton of time into it until, they were like, yeah, your book's not selling. We're going to pass on the sequel. And when I started actually paying attention to social media, the response I got was, oh, cool. That looks like a neat book. Like, I've never heard of it. I was like,
damn,
fuck. So even with, when you're trad pub, you've got to have, be maintaining a platform. Yeah. Certainly in the science fiction fantasy crowd. I don't know what it's like for other genres, might be different. And then with the self-pub side, it's that, except you have to work harder.
Yeah. And completely agree with you. It's like, regardless of what avenue you're going in, indie, self-pub, traditional, you don't have to, but it's obviously a huge boon to create an online presence, to be able to, I hate the word market yourself, like that phrase. It sounds shitty, but at the same time, it's like you can be on social media and be genuine to who you really are, all at the same time you're selling your books to people, because it helps authors share their personality with the people who are reading their books. And at the same time, readers can interact with you in a way that they never have been able to before. Krystle, do you want to get in on this and just gonna talk about a misconception, but also build on what Michael said?
Yeah, well, I'll jump off to what you said, where it's like, when we're sitting down typing, we're putting our hearts and souls into these books, but then we turn it into a product and it's a business. So yes, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram is marketing. But I think the misconception becomes marketing equals talking about your book all the time.
Right.
Where I get the most traction on, stupid tweets about cheese, and Michael Fletcher is known for his grilled cheese. And, so it's like you're just being present is the marketing, and being whoever you are is the marketing. You don't have to build a brand. You don't have to, talk about your book 24/7. You can do a couple of funny things, but people are interested in making human connections, and that's why they come to storytelling. Because storytelling is a human connection into a community. And so by being approximately human on social media, it's marketing. And then the other misconception about Indian and self-publishing is that we're here because we've got nowhere else to go, no one else wants us, and we're dumping our crap books on it. It's not true. And certainly everyone I know are busting their asses to make the most polished, most professional, most artistically valuable story that they've got, and they're taking it seriously. And there's some really amazing stories in the indie circles, and I get that there's a lot to sort through, and it's kind of hard to figure out who to start with, but we're taking it just as seriously as traditionally published authors. It's not an either or situation. It's a both and. Both are good stories. Both are great people, and it's just about where your personality is going to fit best, and also what you have to bring. And both of them are going to be hard work. And it's just about which path is right for you. And the stories are going to blow you away on either side.
Yeah, and I think now we've seen more in self-publishing, indie publishing, that the quality is starting to rise and match up to what traditional publishing has been able to offer readers just based on the workforce behind each release, so self-published authors, indie published authors, these people are working their asses off, like you said, Krystle, to do their due diligence and hire editors or hire sensitivity readers or hire artists who are really, really talented. And, to see the surge in spectacular cover art that is just coming across the board, that is like, someone could look at my shelf and be like, oh, that looks like so professional. It's like, that's a self-pub book or that's an indie book. And it looks amazing right next to
necessarily tell the
book.
difference.
Exactly. Yeah. And Ben, do you want to get in here with a misconception that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, I work with a lot of authors on the consultancy side, so like helping other authors do mostly marketing, but also the publishing side of things. And there is a misconception that a lot of people think, writing a book is easy. It's not. It is literally blood, sweat, tears, whiskey, crying.
That's why most of us drink. Yeah.
Yeah, waking up.
Krystle's actually got whiskey in that coffee mug.
Oh yeah. But yeah, it's
no, this one.
Okay.
I'm trying to think where my whiskey's gone. I think I drank it all. It's blood, sweat, and tears. It's a lot of late nights, a lot of kind of like thought about it. It's a lot of like just stress. So if you're thinking about writing a novel, it's great. It's one of the best things. I love it. Once you finish one, it's also the best feeling. But at the same time, it's not a cakewalk, and that's why it's quite fun when sometimes that someone you meet someone in, I don't know, a street or a pub, and they're like, oh, I could do what you do. It's like, try it.
Yeah,
just
sure,
try
buddy.
it first, and then you can comment on it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a very small group of people that I've met. Otherwise, I would say the misconception as well of that it's okay not to get an editor, that it's okay just to like make a cover on like Word or Canva, or get a cover design from Fiverr that's going to be maybe had by about 50 to another 100 people who have bought the same Canva Fiverr gig. So I think that in terms of having to go into this industry, if you want to make a good go of it and you actually want to make some money or an impact, or push yourself in some sort of way, just get ready for some a strong learning curve or a big learning curve, quite a steep one, and some work, because publishing and the polishing of it are only two facets of a very larger side, and that's the promotion. So it's, I think a lot of people underestimate the work and go in with because it's so tied to dreams and to our creativity side of things. People come into this thinking, I'm going to be so successful and I'm going to put this book up and I'll be a million bestseller by the next year. And I've met a lot of people like that, and it's absolutely fine to have big dreams and to chase dreams. I've got ridiculous heights I want to hit that I probably might or might not, but at least keep those dreams, but also keep the pragmatic side and the realistic side of things together, and to kind of temper that, because that's a quick way to getting disappointed and jaded, and then lashing out at an industry that you just haven't maybe seen in the right light or dug deep enough into.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that applies to any avenue of publishing. It's like, just as creative people, we're sensitive creatures, so it's just a matter of understanding that you're putting your creativity out there for the world to consume, for whoever to consume, and you don't know who's going to read it. You don't know who's going to pick it up. Yeah. So exactly. you just have to go into it with the pragmatic attitude of knowing that somebody might come at you with some criticism. Other people might love it. You're never going to have like a consistent like high all the time. It's like, this is a roller coaster of a life.
It's a job.
It's a job.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's another
get a mug of whiskey, like
where...
Krystle said.
Well, that's another misconception where, you hear about such and such book has gotten mixed reviews, and mixed reviews, that's so scandalous. But it's like, everybody's got mixed reviews. Like, go look at your favorite book. Yeah,
it's like I have mixed reviews. I have mixed reviews of like actual people. It's like you're a mixed review of a person.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like ideally we will reach a broad audience, but then when you reach a broad audience, you've got, everyone is a gamble. So it's like, you're never going to get a book out that's universally loved. You just have to make your choices deliberately, and good luck, basically, and then hustle from there, you know. And if ever you're feeling shitty about the reviews you've got, go look at your very favorite book of all time and filter in the 1-star reviews and go see the bullshit that people say about the book that you think is perfect. And it brings a lot of things into perspective of how everyone's got totally different baggage that they're bringing to art, and whether it meets or not is, you know, it's going to happen. Some people aren't going to get it and some people are, and just remember that you're writing for the people that see what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like write it for your love of whatever you're creating, and then other people are going to love it too. It's like it's never a clear gamble of like this is going to be universally adored or anything like that. Yeah.
I mean, I would think you shouldn't want it to be universally adored. Like, to me, what I tell my authors is write your story. And the people, if you're writing to the market, it's going to come across as inauthentic, and people won't like that. Even it's as weird and fucked up and whatever your story is, tell it as best you can, and people will find it, and the right people will love it.
Exactly.
That's what you should be going for, to my way of thinking.
And Jessica, is there any misconception about indie publishing that you'd like to counter?
I don't know if it's about indie publishing specifically, but there is this kind of back and forth that I see a lot on Twitter, that your fellow writers are not your competition. There's room for everybody, and you don't have to, you know, people who are readers read voraciously, or at least buy voraciously, and put them in stacks and never look at them. But you know, you still get that sale. So you will get further, I would think, by raising up your fellow authors, by shouting out their praises, spreading the word for each other. Everybody can benefit, man. There's room for everybody. It's not an either or whatsoever.
Yeah, I completely agree. And
people read way faster than we can write.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and they will give you shit for it.
The only reason I'm here, and the only reason I'm here is because of the friends that I've made among writers and publishers. And so, you know, the rising tide floats all boats and all that stuff. But also, it's impossible to do this alone. You know, you need a community behind you.
Yeah. And that is honestly like a perfect note
maybe
to
it's
close
not impossible, but I can't imagine what it looks like.
Yeah, I agree. But it's like, for me, you know, doing this podcast and meeting all of these amazing authors, including all of you, you know, this is not something that I ever really imagined when I started doing this podcast. But because of the
speaking of pivots,
capability of us as individuals to use something like Twitter or Instagram or whatever to develop a community that is supporting one another, it's like amazing that we have such cross-pollination right here on this panel of people who come from different spaces, create their own work, help others put work out there, and at the same time we can all just sit down and have a conversation and really spread the love of publishing in general, not necessarily just a specific avenue. It's like we can spread the love of storytelling, and we can just love what we do and love what other people do and share that. And so I'm very, very appreciative for all of you coming and joining me to give your perspectives and help people, you know, at least kick off the thought process of how they want to put their book out there, and that there are so many different possibilities. And so, you know, speaking of community and sharing love, we'll close out with a recommendation from each of you. If you can give a recommendation for a book that is sort of outside of your publishing space, as well as sharing where people can find you on social media. So, Mike, I'll start with you.
Okay. I'm actually going to say to hell with recommending a book outside of my publishing space, because I don't feel like doing that.
I break the rules.
Way back.
Michael, rule breaker Fletcher.
So
that's what the R stands
I read
for.
Legacy.
Michael
read
R.
Legacy
R.
of the
Fletcher,
Brightwash.
romance rule breaker Fletcher.
Shut up. Shut up. I read Legacy of the Brightwash before the last
God.
SPFBO started. And I said, fuck. If she enters this, she's going to win. And that was annoying because I had a book I wanted to enter. She didn't win, but it came second. And honestly, she was robbed. So if you haven't read Legacy of the Brightwash, go get it.
Yeah. And Mike, where can people find you on social media?
Pretty much everywhere.
What's your
Just
in a ditch.
follow the smell of whiskey and grilled cheese sandwiches, and there I'll be.
Do a Twitter search for grilled cheese sandwiches, and all the results will be
Michael R. Fletcher's face? And go listen to him on Wizards, Wares, and Words, which is a great podcast about writing advice, which is very helpful for anyone who's listening to this panel. And go make a grilled cheese sandwich because they're delicious. And Jessica,
for Michael.
Exactly. If you could give a recommendation as well as sharing where people can find you on social media.
Yeah, sure. I was going to recommend a book, and then I realized it's actually an indie pub book, so then I had to choose a different one. I will say I was going to say Not Quite Out by Louise Wellingham because she's amazing and the story's great, but that's technically indie publishing, so I'm not quite as bold as Michael. So I followed the assignment. So I'm going to go with Demise of the Trinity by Patrick Attaway. It's a self-pub book that is super dark and really depressing, but also has heart and will piss you off. And it's unlike anything I've ever read. And it's amazing. So I definitely recommend that.
Cool.
Me, I am at JHL Moon pretty much everywhere. And then Shadowspark is at shadowsparkpub.com, whatever. I'll actually be opening a subsidiary of Shadowspark in the next couple of months called Hearthfire, which will offer cover design, editing, formatting services, basically everything we do for our authors for free for the self-publishing community, so I could actually get paid for some of it. But that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. And Ben,
Thanks.
What about you? Recommendation and social media.
I'll do 2 non-fiction recommendations.
Ooh.
I was going to be a
field.
dick and be like, Ben Galley. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
have you heard of my special edition?
That's it. Oh, look what just came into the shot. No, I'm reading like a lot of random non-fiction at the moment. I'm like kind of to do with my books because I'm writing a magic system that's kind of like chemistry based and biology based. So recently I've been reading that one, I Contain Multitudes. It's probably backwards, by Ed Yong, which is all about how which will freak anyone out, really. There's more microbes on us than actual human cells, and this is actually the planet of microbes, not humans or anyone else, which is really fascinating, and the way that they actually like control every little bit of our lives, whether we like it or not. And then Midnight in Chernobyl, which is again maybe backwards, which is a non-fiction book, obviously very true story. April 26, 1986, Chernobyl exploded, and it's just told like an actual like a fiction sort of story in a non-fiction, obviously, setting. So it's just done with such characterization. It follows all the real people around. And it was the HBO documentary. I'm not sure if the novel came before or after, but it's very closely tied to the HBO documentary, which is also harrowing and very well acted.
Fantastic.
Where you can find me, I'm usually loitering on social media. Linktree/Ben Galley is where you find me. Otherwise, bengalley.com. I've got Discord, I've got Patreon, I've got TikTok, Instagram, all the everything.
Just marketing the shit out of yourself.
Just pissing all over the place and marking my territory like some sort of tiger, I don't know. Cat.
Some sort of man or something.
That is some beautiful, beautiful imagery, Ben. Just pissing all over Vancouver.
That's
good for you.
That's my marketing technique. Physical marking.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you. And Krystle, what about you? Recommendation and social media.
So for anyone who likes to read grimdark, or generally epic fantasy that talks about war, I would recommend this book called The Matterhorn, by Karl Marlantes. He was a Marine in Vietnam, and he wrote a fictionalized novel, but it's very obvious that it's pulled pretty directly from his experiences there. So it's a war story about Vietnam, and it's harrowing. And Grimdark can't touch this stuff, man. Like, this is why I'm always so surprised when people say that our books are pretty dark, because real life is worse.
Pretty fucking dark.
But anyway, it is pretty fucking dark. And then my second recommendation would be Michael Pollan for anybody interested in the natural world.
Yeah.
Ben, you might really like him if you're into that kind of stuff, because he's got some really cool stuff about mushrooms. Specifically, This Is Your Mind on Plants was an incredible book about opium and
mescaline,
caffeine and
caffeine.
mescaline.
Yeah.
And though Michael Pollan is a very good example of how even nonfiction can be a story.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an incredible storyteller. So yeah, those are going to be my recommendations. And then you can find me mostly on Twitter at Krystle Matar. I've got a website that I never update, krystlematar.com. And I think I'm on Instagram too, but also I'm not very present there, but definitely Twitter. Am I?
Yeah.
I guess
yes,
so.
You are.
Every now and then.
I know, but you don't. All right, thank you, Krystle. And yeah, completely
I guess
second.
That means you're stalking me on Instagram.
Of course. And I second Michael Pollan. Krystle and I raved about him during our interview back in February, so go check that out. And Anthony, will close out with you, good sir, if you could do a recommendation and share your social media as well.
I'll second Krystle's recommendation of Matterhorn. That's a really great book. One of the best books about Vietnam I've read, I think. And I've read a lot of them. In terms of fiction, Norylska Groans by Clayton Snyder and somebody else.
And some other guy.
Somebody else. Some weird guy.
Some romantic guy, yeah.
Covered in blood and pus and shit. It's disgusting, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And also non-fiction, I'd recommend a book called Real History. That's REEL, History, by Alex von Tinselmann. She's a historian who compares historical films to historical fact, often with hilarious results. It's a really good book, and you won't be surprised to hear that Mel Gibson is the worst offender when it comes to historical film.
You're talking about Gladiator's not historically accurate?
Braveheart.
Braveheart, yeah. That historical book. You can find all my socials at my website, anthonyryan.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And Goodreads, if you want to follow me there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. And when is The Martyr out?
The Martyr's out 28th of June in the States, I think, and 30th of June in the UK.
Awesome. Yeah. So look forward to that. And honestly, thank you all so much. This was a very enlightening panel. And I'm glad that we could just get this information out there. It's like a launching pad for people to think about how they want to publish their books. And I really appreciate you all being here and sharing your takes on it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.